Welcome to Helen Bulkeley Talks With, and this week I have an interview with award-winning entrepreneur and record-breaking adventurer Neil Laughton. He's served in the SAS for 12 years, he's climbed all 7 summits, he's been to the North Pole and the South Pole, and he's even flown a car from London to Timbuktu and has many other world firsts to his name. And here's the cool thing, he has in writing from a teacher from when he was at school saying that he wasn't achieving very much. Boy, did he turn that around. Neil, while I was prepping for this interview, it was like I was going to interview 8 people in one, to be honest. The amount you've achieved, the amount that you've done is phenomenal. So I've tried to sort of break it down into chunks of what we can talk about. And the first, a hugely important part of your life has been your experiences with Everest. So I wonder if we could go back when it's quite a headline to have been involved with surviving the worst storm in 100 years, which was in 1996. But what was the reality like of being up there, being to the most infamous mountain in the world and not actually knowing if you'd be able to get down?
It was a pretty torrid experience. Obviously, I was a reasonably experienced mountaineer, alpinist, but I had my chance to climb Everest, took it, was on the mountain. It was probably pure chance, bad luck, that it was the worst storm in 100 years to hit the peak. And at that moment, my team and I, we were heading to the 4th camp, the South Col at 8,000 meters. And basically all hell broke loose as I arrived at 6 in the evening. It took 45 minutes to put a tent up. The conditions were pretty atrocious, and it was really survival mode for the rest of that night. But normally teams having summited that day would have been back down and off the mountain by 3-4 o'clock normally. And so we had no idea that so many people were in trouble, indeed still sort of disappearing, being blown off the mountain, and so on and so forth. No alarm calls were set out, and we just hunkered down in our tent, unaware of the tragedy that was unfolding around us. It was only in the morning that the Russian climber Anatoly, who'd been up all night very bravely trying to rescue his teammates, came knocking on the tent door and said, "Can you give some help?" And of course, I got my boots on and went out and helped. 96 was the disaster year. 98, 2 years later, I put another team together, this time with a bit more experience and knowledge of what to expect, preparing for the worst, like terrible storms. But we had a good year. 98 was a great year. And Bear, myself, summited the mountain on the way back down 20,000 feet. As Bear likes to do, he does like to get naked occasionally. And so he stripped off literally 20,000 feet, asked me to take a photograph, ice axes in the air. Apart from this dubious habit, he's a very nice guy and doing very well, and does lots of great work for charities and the Scouts and all that kind of stuff. But I've had 6 expeditions to Everest, lots of different things, not just climbing. Taking a guy in a wheelchair, the flight over Everest, motorized parachuting, highest dinner parties, and so on and so forth. It's a bit of gets under your skin, Everest. But I think it will probably be my last on the mountain for sure. A couple of years ago when we got the highest record for the dinner party, black tie dinner party, Guinness World Record.
Yeah, that's awesome. What always overwhelms me when I think about it is the danger, because it's not like you go up and go down. You're there for, is it minimum 6 weeks? It's a huge chunk of time to kind of be living on a knife edge of not knowing what's to come. And you've had both experiences.
It's about 10%, action and 90% sitting around drinking tea, as far as I can make out. High altitude mountaineering is not the most glorious and dynamic of endeavors. And yes, there is danger, obviously. you know, back in the mid-90s when I was climbing, the stats were for every 6 that succeeded in getting to the top, one person would die. So 1 in 6. The stats are not great. I mean, they've improved markedly since. But no, I think you have to, if you've got a real passion for a project and you want to give it a go, the best thing is to prepare for the worst, but try not to dwell on it too much and too often. You can just psych yourself out. So I think about the dangers, put you know, practical plans in place, make sure I've got the right kit, and you know, just make sensible decisions like departure times through the ice fall and stuff like that, and just be as careful as you can.
I'm not dwelling on the dangers, because you had such amazing times up there as well. We mentioned it a minute ago, you know, you were part of the team when Bear Grylls flew over. Can you tell me a little bit about that, what he actually flew in, how it happened? Because it's very high to be doing what he was doing up there.
Yeah, so this was a project called Mission Everest, and it was Bear's idea with a friend, Giles Cardozo, back in 2007 and 8. And the idea, and we all three of us love to fly, and we thought that it would be a great idea to try and get a new world record for the highest motorized parachute ascent or flight. And Giles is a great British self-taught engineer, pilot. Bear does a bit of everything, as you know, and I'm also a pilot, you know, fly parachutes and helicopters and all sorts, but it was just too difficult to resist the temptation to go back to Everest 2007 to attempt a world record for the highest motorized parachute or paramotor flight. And basically, a bit of a long story, in the Alps 1 year before, I had a terrible crash. My parachute collapsed and I free fell about 100 feet, landed on the French farmhouse roof and nearly killed myself. And I became, after that, recovering injury-wise, I became team leader and safety officer, and then Bear and Giles went on to attempt the flight on Everest or over Everest. Giles's machine conked out at about 22,000 feet, I think, and Bear's carried on up to about 29, the height of the summit of Everest, not quite over the top of it, but adjacent at a similar height. And yeah, he glided down and we opened the champagne.
Yeah, I bet that tasted really good. Gosh, I had no idea that the year before you'd been in such a bad injury, such a bad accident, and you injured yourself. But what comes from that is you've still achieved so much since then. So it's obviously your mentality to not let things like that get in the way of what you want to achieve.
My three main kind of values in life, if you like, are discovery, being curious, and travel and sport and adventure, and also team. You know, I love being part of a team. I can't recall ever doing anything solo. I think that would be pretty dull and boring. So discovery, team, and adventure is three very important principles in my life.
I can certainly tell, and they're great principles to live by. So I know you've done quite a bit at sea level as well. So you were saying how you like to go for things that are quite eccentric, and you've certainly done a few of those. But you were the first person to jet ski around the whole of the UK and Ireland. So that's another idea you've had, very different from climbing all the way up there, coming down to sea level. So that must have been quite a challenge as well.
They've all got a bit of a purpose, as far as I'm concerned. How the jet ski challenge came about was purely the fact that you know, we all used to travel a lot around the world seeing the wonderful sights, but actually I knew that Great Britain or the UK was as stunning as anywhere in the world, particularly around the coast. And you know, I've been to a few sort of beach summer holidays around the coast, but I actually thought, you know, I really want to see it. And I think you've had Lizzie on the interview who paddleboarded. That's far too long and difficult, my book. So we thought about it. Bear jumped on the idea. We collaborated, and then just thought, why not jet ski around mainland Britain and then subsequently Ireland. And I went to the Yamaha, who was the leading manufacturer of jet skis at the time, and gave them this idea, and would they lend us some machines? And they said, well, we can't lend you. We'll let you have it at cost, 50% off, as many as you like. But basically, it's impossible. You'll never do it. Most people do jet skiing for 20 minutes at a time and then get off shattered. It took us 23 days. We could have done it quicker, but we were seeing the sights as per the main reason for why I was doing it. So we had a wonderful time, lovely trip, lots of memories, good friendships, and every day was a challenge and a new place to visit and stay and get to.
It sounds like a fabulous trip. Now, another thing that you've been working on the last few years, I do love cycling, and I do love talking to people about cycling, but the bikes you've been on are slightly different, aren't they? They've sort of gone back in time a little bit, but you've been achieving great things on them. How did cycling on penny farthings come about for you? And then you've been going on to get more Guinness World Records, like no hand cycling with it.
I mean, I've always loved to cycle. I was captain of England bicycle polo at one point when I was young and fit. And I was reading one Sunday Country Life magazine, and an old boy wrote in saying that penny farthings were making a comeback about nine years ago. And I thought, penny farthings, I wonder if I could ride one of those. And then my next thought was, I wonder if you could play polo on a penny farthing. And so, man of action, I ordered 8 from the States, imported them, built them in my backyard, taught myself how to ride, taught a few friends. And now we stage once a year the International England v Scotland penny farthing polo match.
But what about the no hands on penny farthing? You've obviously taken it a step further.
So it's a fixed wheel bike, which means a bit like if you take the tail prop off a helicopter, the centrifugal force would spin it the whole thing around. Similar with a bike, when you've got direct torque on the front wheel, as you press right, the wheel veers off 45 degrees, and you think you're going to crash. The next time the pedal comes down the other side, it veers to the other side. So it requires an element of crazy danger to get through the rotation. But once you've mastered it, it's actually quite easy. You snake left and right down the road, and it can be done. And I'd recruited some fast cyclists to get the indoor and outdoor 1 hour penny farthing world records, for which I was just team manager. But bumped into a senior guy at Guinness World Records and said, would you be interested in some penny farthing no hand riding world records? And they jumped at it. Set me 3 different distances, a sprint, 10 kilometers and 1 hour without touching the handlebars last November. And I gave it a go in my local velodrome, and 3 certificates are now on my wall.
That's awesome. So how many times do you appear in the Guinness World Records now across everything?
I honestly, I can't tell you. I mean, I think the first one was when I was in the Marines back in '83. We did a 24-hour pram pushing record. So a young Marine was in one of those rather large pram, double-handed, and we sprinted across the Sainsbury's car park backwards and forwards for 24 hours. So I think that was the first one, and there's been quite a few since. If I'm honest, I'm more interested in kind of firsts rather than world records, if I'm honest.
One thing I really wanted to talk to you about was, I know you were saying then about your love of flying, and you've always loved flying. And then you decided to fly a car from London to Timbuktu. How did that come about, and what was that like? Because I know that you had a lot of goes at it, and very nerve-wracking the first time you try and do these things. So what was that like?
So this was the Skycar Challenge, Skycar expedition. It was probably my most iconic expedition of the 50 that I've organised and led. And if I'm honest, probably the most dangerous as well. It really was quite a challenge. Basically, Gilo, who featured in the Everest paramotor flight expedition, literally after that expedition, he said to me, Neil, I think my technology will work to make the world's first road legal flying car. And I sat up and took note and said, Giles, that's great, very exciting. How much to make a prototype? He gave me a rather eye-wateringly high figure, and I found myself reaching across to shake his hand and become the customer. So I then went out and got some sponsorship and some support. Knew that an adventure and an expedition was going to be required to test fly and trial this world first vehicle and flying machine. And if you like, if anyone's seen Mad Max, it's like an off-road sporty buggy rally car. Gilo's very cleverly put a propeller and twisted the engine round to make it fly, drive and fly. And it flew under a big paraglider's canopy. And of course, you then, pack it up and then drive on roads to get to your restaurant or whatever. And then the next day you lay out the parachute, engage the propeller and take off and fly to your next destination. I think the iconic moment was when I tried and very nearly didn't make it on 2 attempts to cross and fly the Straits of Gibraltar from Spain to North Africa. And one very nearly ended up me in the drink. But on the 3rd attempt, I took off from Tarifa on the beach, flew across the Straits of Gibraltar, landed illegally, it's a long story, landed illegally at a heliport in North Africa, was so pleased I was still alive. I was jumping for joy when armed police arrested me. Whilst I knew a little bit of Spanish, I played the dumb English bloke, and they soon got bored of me. Of course, spending all those years in the military, being taught how to resist interrogation came into play, and so I didn't give them an awful lot. I think they got bored and let me go after a few hours. We did a journey from London to Timbuktu, 10,000 kilometers, 8 countries, went through 3 minefields. This is back in 2009. And it was a pretty iconic expedition, 12 of us going from London to Timbuktu, crossing the Sahara Desert. And it was a Channel 4 documentary called Daredevils, the Flying Car.
Just as an overall summary for everything that you've your records and your climbing, you are part of the elite club. You've got the Adventurers Grand Slam, which is climbing the 7 summits and going to the North and South Pole. Was this something you were trying to achieve all along, or was it as you were going along you thought, I can do this, and it kind of came about like that, or did you always want to have that on your wall?
Yeah, I was always enjoying climbing and doing climbing trips, and then but they weren't particularly high. They were in the Alps and Scotland and Pyrenees and stuff like that. And then I can't even remember the year, back in 1991, I was backpacking around South America, and I bumped into an old London friend who said that he was on an expedition to climb South America's highest mountain, Aconcagua. And I pricked my ears up. I was literally in a cafe having a coffee, and they were leaving the next day. I had a pair of jeans, a pair of trekking boots, and a leather jacket. And he kind of said, why don't you come to base camp? So I said, great, yeah, when are you leaving? Like tomorrow morning? Okay. I met up with the team, 8 of them, and James, my friend, and I trekked into base camp. Felt brilliant, 14,000 feet base camp. I thought, I'll climb a bit higher. Camp 1, 16,000 feet, no problem. Went on to camp 2, 18,000 feet, no sleeping bag. pretty chilly night, I thought I'm not going to go any higher. And then unfortunately James got ill, had to leave. I managed to acquire and borrow all of his kit, and I was only one of two to actually summit the mountain in the end. And that led to sort of climbing the highest peak in South America. I obviously climbed, I think, Kilimanjaro by then. And then at the same time, I read Dick Bass's book, Seven Summits. I thought that'd be a great challenge whilst I'm working and, you know, spending time in the office, having one big mountain a year to climb. And sure, you know, after 7 or 8 years, you've ticked them all off. And then Grand Slam, somebody invented the Adventurers Grand Slam, highest mountain each continent plus North and South Poles. Well, they were kind of, you know, slightly on my list anyway. So I put a trip together to the North Pole. We played first round of golf. And then back in 2012, to commemorate Captain Scott's arrival at the pole in 1912, 100 years later to the day, we did a ski journey into the pole, and I organised the world's first game of cricket.
I remember that. It's fabulous. I love it. When you're doing these huge things that so few people do, you think, what else can I add in here? Let's play cricket.
Yeah, it's always great to have a sort of a subsidiary aim. And normally it's or a third aim. So challenge, raise money for a good cause or charity, and then something quirky. So to give you a very good example, as we were doing 2018, our highest dinner party on Everest, this will give you an idea of my character. So we're milling around base camp, you know, just sort of chilling and acclimatizing and getting used to, you know, getting organized for the world record attempt in a few days' time. I gathered everybody together and said, right, lads and lasses, we're going to go for a new world record, completely making it up. So 2 teams line up, and I put a spoon and an egg in each of the front 2. We did the highest egg and spoon race in the world. It's just a lot of fun. It's just nothing more than that.
Yeah, it's great. And people get on board, not only people that are doing it with you, but people that then are inspired by it, because that's the human element, isn't it? Might not be able to relate to what it's like being at 22,000 feet, but they can relate to what it's like, you know, playing cricket somewhere or an eggs and spoon race. So I love that. Now, a lot of your stories, what I love, when I sort of ask about something, it's like, well, there's a long story and it goes back and it always comes back to something. And I love that story about how, you know, you had your jeans and a leather jacket and you thought, I'll give it a go. The sort of opportunity striked and you went for it. But if we go right back, I think, and it's amazing to hear this was said about you when you were at school, that Neil's trying very hard, but not achieving very much, which is incredible that someone said that about you when everything that we've discussed that you have achieved. So did that kind of start something for you to be like, well, I do try hard, but I am going to achieve a lot?
Look, I have to be really honest. Adventuring has been in my genes from an early age, but at a similar time frame, I was struggling at school. There was no 2 questions about it. You know, my first attempt at maths O-level, I got a graded U, absolutely just the worst of the worst. I mean, ungradable. I managed to pass on the 3rd attempt. You'll be pleased to know. Yes, a teacher did put, and I have it in writing, Neil is trying very hard, but achieving very little. But you know, that's what it was like in those days. Look, I just had to work really hard, and you know, academia didn't come naturally to me. But it's like anything in life, you know, if you're determined, you don't give up. You know, you keep trying, keep pushing the doors. Opportunities will come your way, like you said, and you know, I'm a great believer in that, those 2 concepts. You know, have an idea, have a passion, find it, and be determined to make sure that it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that resonated with me because I always got the Progress and Perseverance Award at school, which ultimately means trying very hard, but not doing very well. And the same teacher actually said to me, Helen talks so much in class, she's not going to talk for a living. Ha!
No, I love it. And, you know, when the junior school, you know, all these horrible memories coming back. I was back the year when you were supposed to go from junior school to senior school. get this, I was backed yeared, so I had to do a second year in the last year of junior school. So all my mates went up into the senior school and I was left in junior. I mean, how awful you can imagine that is. And that same headmaster said to me candidly that he wished me luck, but he didn't think I would pass a single exam. And I'd like to bump into him one day and just tell him a few things that I achieved.
When you left school, you then went to serve for 12 years in the Special Forces, which again, not many people do. You have to be very skilled and quite a very strong character. So what was it like serving in that? And I mean, I do get a great sense of your character, but you have to be so tough to be part of that.
Look, I realised that Special Forces was always going to be a challenge to be selected, but they need volunteers like every organisation. I'd had a few years as a Royal Marine. I was pretty fit. I thought, who dares wins, as their motto is. Why not? They can but say no. What I did do was make sure I was super fit. So in the 6 months before I went through the gate, I'd been running every single day 14 miles in training, 5 days a week, 14 miles a day. I worked out it was equivalent to 60 marathons. I was super fit. And that's the bedrock, the starting point, so that you don't get weeded out early doors. And I was one of the fittest on selection. And then it's you've got to do your best, and either your face fits or it doesn't. Somehow my ugly mush fitted reasonably well, and they let me in.
Oh gosh, what an achievement. When you break it down like that, I do talk to a lot of people about the importance of fitness and health, and it's amazing hearing you say that, but the actual doing of it, 60 marathons back to back, I mean, that's intense. Now, after the Special Forces, I know all along you've been doing everything we've discussed, but then when you came out of the Special Forces, which obviously would have been a very big change and very tough for anyone, but you then went on and founded your own construction company. So how did that come about?
Well, I kind of always had a plan to be financially secure, and obviously my experiences in academia and all of that, I suspected that I would never make general, where you can start to earn decent money. And so I went to the rank of captain after 14 years serving in the military, and I thought I'd try my hand at business, and did a few years working for others, pretty unsuccessfully, it has to be said. And then, once I'd found an industry that suited me, what skills I had, I was always quite good at sort of promoting and selling, reasonably self-confident. So I chose sort of construction, started a company. Again, not solo. I started it on my own, but then recruited a business partner who knew what he was doing, thankfully, in the engineering construction world. He was my business partner, and we built a business from nothing to 40 million turnover over a number of years. And then just as we were having the discussion, do we carry on building this to 100 million, which was my target, or do we flog it and put some money in the bank? And he was slightly the more cautious of the two of us. I voted for the 100 million. He voted for for flogging. We flipped a coin. He won. We sold the business. That was that.
Wow, it was literally on flipping a coin.
Yep.
Hey, then the decision was made. Well, mind you, 40 million, I appreciate it's not 100 million, but it's still a pretty good nudge in the right direction, isn't it?
Yeah, it was all right, yeah.
Now, at the beginning of this, where I talked about, and we've also been discussing the last few days when we've been in touch about COVID and how it's affected us. So when I talk to you, I get this incredible sense of how you're so determined, and you persevere, and you do whatever. But whatever you can to achieve your goal. But what's your takeaway to give to other people? Because it's hard at the moment in the world. It's hard for all of us, whatever way you look at it. But you've got a lot of grit and determination behind you. So what would your takeaway be to people that need a bit of that in their lives right now?
Look, it's terrible times, isn't it? I mean, I'm probably one of the most optimistic people out there, and I'm not that optimistic right now. Having said that, it is what it is, and you just have to make the most of the situation at hand. So I hope, like me, people have been making the most of it. I've almost, dare I say it, got to know my children an awful lot better in the last 3 months um, than I did before, and that's a wonderful thing, a bonus. I've written 85,000 words of my memoir, which would probably never have got done. I've become DIY king around here. Every fence post and shed has been painted. The paving stones have been, blasted, clean. I mean, there's hardly a job left undone. I'm feeling great about that. So you've just got to take the positives. Yeah, business has dried up. There's no speaking engagements. Let's just hope it doesn't last too much longer.
But what is next for you? I know you are inspirational speaker and you've got your own business on that. So what is next for you? Have you got any more challenges, or is it business at the moment?
So most of my work is, working with teams and hopefully trying to inspire business leaders and their teams to succeed and become high-performing teams. And that obviously in the current climate is difficult, but I think the word pivoted my business a little bit, redesigned the website to rather than indoor training. I didn't do that much indoor anyway, but I've got some land here in Sussex, so you can see glimpsing out the window behind me. In fact, you can see the shed I've just painted, literally finished today. You can see it in the background. So instead of my clients meeting around a table, around sofas in my building, we're out around the bonfire. There's a fire pit, and we're sitting around a fire pit now. We're getting back in the game, and hopefully, God willing, things will start to turn to normal. But you have to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to the shed, Neil. It looks absolutely fabulous. I know you were fishing for a compliment. But also
Thanks. I literally just spotted it in the background.
It wasn't when you getting ready for the interview, sort of thinking, I'll just
unintentional purposes, but doesn't it look smart?
It looks fabulous. Looks really good. But what I love is the reason why people will come to you is, I mean, they're obviously coming to you for your experiences, but that's so much better than being in a classroom, isn't it? Because they've come to you for you being at one with nature and explaining all your experiences, and being by a bonfire will make it so much more real and so much more doable for them.
Yeah, great. And what the thing I've learned in the game that I've been in since selling my business and getting into the sort of coaching, mentoring and inspiring space is actually what people mostly need is a jolly good conversation about stuff. And, they don't want to sit in a classroom, learning particularly how the brain works or, falling asleep in front of a PowerPoint presentation. Get people around a fire with a cup of tea or a coffee, or dare I say a beer, and talk about relationships, about future, about planning for the future and their business, and how people work together and how they can be more effective, in collaboration and stuff like that. Just ordinary stuff is so important.
Yeah, so important. And what you were saying there in summary is exactly why I so wanted to interview you. So I'm so grateful that you gave me your time, because I love talking to inspirational people. And I think particularly now it's really important that people hear what other people have been up to, because you never know what hearing someone else say could just knock in your mind and make you want to go for something. And I mean, you're just the perfect person. All your adventuring, everything that you've achieved, and also now inspiring others. So
very kind, very kind. But you too, you're an inspiration in your own way. So thank you very much for interviewing me. It's a great honor and a pleasure.
Thanks, Neil. You take care. I'll see you very soon.